Yeah, g'day and welcome. I'm Peter Bender from Bundaberg Commercial. I'm a commercial real estate agent and business broker. I help people to buy and sell commercial properties and businesses. Last week we spoke about every buyer's greatest fear, and that is the fear of being ripped off, especially by a salesperson. You may be looking at buying a commercial property which you paid $1 million for to find out you've suddenly got a whole heap of maintenance issues and a bad tenant. Or you may have bought a business and you paid $500,000 for it to find out it's really only worth about $250,000. So we went through a little bit of the history on how to identify good salespeople and bad salespeople. This week, I'm actually going to go through the sales process. I've been in sales since my 20s. I've been a sales manager, I've been a sales trainer, I've set up sales teams. So I've got a fair understanding on the sales processes. And this week I'm going to go through some of the things that will help you identify a good salesperson from a bad salesperson. And at the end of the video, also share some ideas that'll help you minimize the risk of being taken for a ride, and understanding that you're actually getting what you're getting to pay your business for or your property for. We spoke last week about the rise of salespeople, and it essentially came around from the time of the Industrial Revolution when there was more supply than there was demand. We looked about industrial machines coming in for like a bakery. They used to do 20 loaves of bread a day. Suddenly they got machineries and bigger ovens. They're able to make 100 loaves a day. What do you do with extra bread? And we spoke about Little Miss Mischief, who was the world's first salesperson, coming in, taking that extra load of breads, going to a nearby town and selling the excess bread and getting a commission from it. That was the process from about the early 1900s to around about the mid-1900s. Around about the 1950s, after the Second World War, the structure of business changed quite dramatically. It got to the stage where products suddenly started to get a little bit more complicated. It wasn't so much now that we only had a loaf of bread. You had situations where it was different types of bread: rye bread, kibble bread, Turkish bread, flat bread, sourdough bread. You want it sliced, you want it seeded. Suddenly the salespeople needed to have a little bit of what we call product knowledge. And as things continued, we had a lot of door-to-door salespeople. The familiar stories of door-to-door vacuum clean salespeople who would come around with the big clunky vacuum cleaners and go to each house to house. It's probably quite revolutionary for some of the younger viewers that I have, but this is how a lot of sales had started off. So there's a lot of cold calling, and salespeople got to the stage where they really needed to know their product quite well. The result of that is we had our first sales trainers. Initially, they were people who ran their businesses because they knew their product. And as you got to being a situation where you had stores or multiple offices, your salespeople didn't have the benefit of being with the owner. So salespeople got to the stage where sales trainers really started to come up as a career after the 1950s, to the 1980s and onwards after that. But it really started around about the 1960s. If you have a salesperson who's got grey hair, and you can't quite hide mine, they were probably taught in what I would call the classical sales structure. For a salesperson who was a technical type person, it was very much about know your product and then follow the structure. The structure will get you the sale. Now, that structure is actually behind us. And as you can see, it's sequential, similar to product knowledge. It's all step by step, and salespeople were taught, follow the steps, you'll get the sales at the end. There's an introduction. There's what's called a bridge into fact finding. Surprise, surprise, then comes fact finding. Then you have a bridge into presentation. Can you work out what comes next? Presentation. And then you have a trial close, overcoming objectives, and then you have close and wrap up. That was a structure that was used till about the late 1990s. And next week we'll go into how the millennium has changed sales strategy. But you will find in commercial real estate and areas that are quite complex, like legal, accountancy, you'll find people who have been trained in this particular structure. So what these actual elements are, in the introduction, it is essentially identify yourself and your company. I'm Peter from Bundaberg Commercial. You're having a look at establishing some rapport. And I love it when you get a telemarketer, this is, Frida from the Philippines or whatever the caper is. How are you today? How are you today is not an ability to create structure or establish rapport. Good people will come up with something totally different. If you get someone who says, how are you today? You should get your first signal saying this is probably not a good salesperson. Not because they're unethical or have their own sales commission motive in front of them, but more a case of this indicates someone who hasn't been trained properly. If you get a salesperson who hasn't been trained properly, that increases dramatically the chances of you having a bad sale or a bad experience. So that's your first little flag that comes up with. You also want to have a look at identifying the decision maker. Salespeople are trained to minimize their time with people who can't sign the checks. And that is identified at the introduction. They may ask, is this your business, or are you the person responsible for blah, 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 ordering purchases and, toilet paper for the business, whatever it is that they're trying to sell. The bridge into fact finding, that is essentially recognizing that when you talk to someone, they may not be applicable or available to talk to you at that particular point of time. Now, this structure, it doesn't matter if it is a case of a telephone call, if it's a case of a face-to-face call, if it's account management, if it's cold calling, or if it's someone ringing in or someone walking in the office. The structure is always the same. The only difference is the introduction. If you're doing cold calling, you need to have much stronger introduction than someone who maybe a car salesperson and someone's walked off the lot knowing exactly what car it is that they want to have a look at. So the bridge in fact finding is essentially, we used to call it permission to proceed, is now a good time to talk to you about, that sort of aspect. And if the customer says no, which is quite, they're running businesses, who knows what's happening on their day, then it's a matter of booking a more appropriate time. A good salesperson will organise an alternative time to run with it. If, however, the client is comfortable and happy to talk, or say, I've got 30 seconds, run with it, what the salesperson will do, the next step, is what's called fact-finding. Now, fact-finding is the most important part of the structure. A lot of people say it's all about how hard you can push, how hard you can shove, how well you can close. No. If a salesperson does their fact-finding well and does it really well, they probably don't need the rest of the structure. If you've identified what your client wants, why they're there, what they need, and already have in your mind how you can satisfy that requirement, then you're 3/4 of the way to the sale. What happens when people are pushy? It's usually because they have no idea what the customer wants. They just want to churn and run through. So if you have a salesperson who doesn't ask a lot of questions from you, once again, that's a flag to indicate to you that the match of the product to what you're looking for may not be right there. These are things that you need to have a look at. You may find that they will ask open questions, questions that elicit a lot of information. Why is it you're looking for that new car? Why is it you're looking for a business? What is it about this property that has interest you? They'll have what they call funnel questions. They're questions where you start off really big. Do you have an idea what make of car you want? What model car you want? What color you want? It goes down to more narrow and narrow and narrow. The idea is to eliminate the options of what the client's looking for, but also to make sure that you're really only spending time with the client on something that the client actually wants. You also have a look at closed questions. They can be simple as yes, no. People who are a bit klutzy, is klutzy the right word? Clunky, bit clunky at sales. They're very poor with the structures. They come up with questions like, you don't want to be the only person in the street that doesn't have the new Tesla, do you? Those sort of type questions, and the customer says, oh no. It just brings up their hackles, but it's a demonstration once again of the skill set of the salesperson. When I talk in terms of salesperson, let's recognize that there are good mechanics and bad mechanics. There are good electricians, bad electricians, good accountants, bad accountants. There's going to be good salespeople and bad salespeople. The two things you look for in no matter who you talk to and in no matter what occupation there are is you want to look at their character and you want to look at their competency. The competency is what I'm talking about today in regards to the structure. That's the sales training, the sales techniques, the understanding of what their job actually is. Like the mechanic who has a competency of being able to diagnose the errors, to be able to pull the engine apart, to put it back together again, as opposed to character, which is when we look at the ethics, what drives them, what motivates them, what is it that they're looking at. Are they someone that you want to talk to? Are they honest? Are they likely to take you for a ride? Or are they likely to work extra hard to get you that satisfaction that you're looking for? After you've done the fact finding, the person will go into what's called a bridge into presentation. So we're up to here now. The bridge into presentation, everybody has limited time. So sometimes it may be a case of you thank the client for the time they've given and the information they've given, and you ask them, have you got time for me to give you some ideas or to present something, or have you got time for me to go and take you to that property or have a look through that car, test drive that car. You want to have a look at that situation because once again the client may not have time. Also, in complex sales, it's very difficult to do fact finding and then go straight into presentation. Financial services would be an example in that area. It will quite often take a lot of diligence, a lot of compliance, and a lot of reporting for the salesperson to put the package together to talk to you. So they may actually do a bridge into presentation where they schedule another appointment for you. If you've got someone who's doing that, recognize the fact that they're probably fairly good at what they do, and that should give you a bit of confidence in the information that they give you. At the presentation, they will usually recap. So, Mr. Smith, you're looking for a Tesla that's white, that's a sedan, for the purpose of being able to take the kids around as well as zip down to Brisbane, which is a 7-hour trip. They recap the key elements they got from the fact finding for you. They'll look at what we call sell the sizzle. It's not just, like I say to people, it's not a game of chess where there's no emotion involved. It's more a case of, wouldn't you feel fantastic in this bright white car that matches your outfit? Wouldn't you like the fact that you're comfortable in this car? It's a soft leather reclining, as have you relaxed while you're driving? Those sort of type emotional aspects. There's not a lot of emotion in the classical sales technique and classical sales structure, but in the presentation is where you'll find what they call the sell the sizzle sort of concept. We're really looking for matching a presentation against 3 key reasons or 3 key things that you found out in the fact-finding area. Experience is, if you've got 5 or 6 reasons for the client on why they should buy that particular product or service that would suit them, if they don't buy after 3, they're not going to buy after 6. 3 seems to be a magic number. Cognitively, the mind has difficulty dealing with more than 3 things at once. And if you're a bloke like me, we have difficulty dealing with more than 1 thing at once. So, if you have a lady sales rep, take it easy on us guys. We just don't handle complexity or a lot of aspects. 3 is the magic number for sales. When they've done the presentation, they get to what we call a trial close. You may have things like, how does that sound to you? Is this what you're looking for? Am I on the right track? I think one of the ones I had, on a ratio of 0 to 10, where 0 is you've got no hope of buying this, 10 is give it to me right now and I'll pay cash. Where are you on that ratio? And people may come back, 7. And the other may say, well, what takes you from 7 to 10? Or they say, that's fantastic. Most people buy at 5. But you get a trial close. It's like testing the water. Is the customer ready to buy? Normally, unless you've really done your fact-finding and your presentation well, and good people will have done that, people who haven't got a lot of experience or a rush or badly trained will find that this is where they get the objections. Customers say, no, I'm not ready to buy yet. What about this? How about that? What happens as this happens? How do we do that? How does it compare with this? This is when we call them objections, but usually it's a request for more information. It's rarely a case. Objection is probably the wrong word, but that's the terminology they use. And with this structure, there are hundreds of schools and books and videos and organizations that do this type of training in their classical model. They may have different names, but the concepts are the same. So instead of request for information, they may have overcome objections. There is a structure in there, and you'll find, once again, a good person will acknowledge the objection. They'll clarify it, and then they'll provide some answers, and then they'll check. A bad person, I've seen and heard sales managers tell their reps, don't worry about the first objection. If they don't mention it twice, it's not important. Just keep going, keep pushing, get that sale, close that sale, get them to sign the check. So that is, once again, another indicator for you to be aware if you've got someone looking out for your interests or not looking out for your interests. Then you can have the closer after that, and it may be as simple as, how would you like to proceed now? Would you like me? I have the paperwork here for you. Whatever the process is for that company, that is when they put the close. And if they've done their job well and they followed the steps from the introduction to the bridges through the fact-finding presentation, they should usually get very close to making the sale there. The last step that we have, close and wrap up, is, I say to people that buyers are like sheep. They get quite nervous quite easily. They'll jump at shadows. And quite often they will go home and start to feel guilty about whatever it is they've bought. So part of the wrap up is avoiding what we call post-sales blues. Showing people the benefits, reiterating what their needs were, explaining again what they've done, letting them know the step-by-step in the process. And for something like commercial sales or selling a business, there is an extensive process afterwards. And I generally just do one step at a time. I said, we'll organise a template for your offer to purchase, and we'll fill that out together so I can then go back to the seller and talk to them about that. There'll be a process to run with it. And good salespeople will contact their client and let them know on a regular basis how the process is. That is about it. So we've spoken today about the need for a new model and sales training, and that is because complexity of products came about. So products which had a lot of product knowledge requirements meant that salespeople needed to understand their product better. And because of that complexity, they needed a process to be able to work through. And the classical sales process, as behind me, is what was used from about the 1950s to about the 1990s. You still see a lot of people will use that, particularly of this generation. Now, I've gone through several different iterations of sales training models. This was just the first one. This is what I was trained in the mid-80s, and that's what was used in some of Australia's largest organisations. We've gone through being able to identify when you've got a person who's not well trained. If they don't do their introduction well, if they ask you how you are, how's the weather, some lame excuse to try and build rapport, the indication is you may need to watch this person, probably because they just haven't been trained. If there's no fact finding, if they're not asking you questions, then that definitely is the biggest sign that you may have a challenging situation. The presentation is fine. They should have that match for you. How they overcome objections. Do they actually address it and take care of those issues and have the time for you? And how do they do the close and the wrap up? If you get that concept from people coming through, then odds are you're going to have a decent salesperson, someone who's there to help you to run with it. Their character, okay, we still got to work on that. But like I said, you can have a good mechanic or a bad mechanic. Skill set is what we looked at today. Next week, we're going to go through how this model changed to be a lot more problem solving. Problem solving was a big change. We're going to talk about the Harvard Business School and how they changed sales training for forever. We're going to talk about peacekeeping techniques in the Middle East and how that changed sales training. And we're going to talk about undersea mining and how that changed sales training, international waters and underground mining, how the business world has changed, and it takes it from there. Enjoy your week, and as I always say, take care and God bless. Feel free to like this video. it allows me to generate it to more people. And please hit subscribe. The more people I can help, the better off. They're not going to be taking your sales away. They're probably in other countries, but it all helps. And it lets me know that I'm doing a decent job. All right, take care and God bless. Bye.